Good morning. So I've been here exactly 1 week as a visitor, and I've really enjoyed myself, mostly. The heat has been a little challenging, but we can't do anything about that except use the Dharma methods for transforming it into the path. And I've really enjoyed so many aspects of the life here, including this pre-lunch BBC talk. I found that really, really nice, just to have a short little meaningful and inspiring talk before the meal. And the last couple of days, we've seen the theme of death, two talks on that theme. And then yesterday's talk was a good news story of Delta 15, was it? Very, very nice. And I thought to continue those two themes and combine them and tell a good news story about death. I think there probably aren't too many of those. Most of the stories we hear are, troubling, disturbing, frightening, sad. So this is probably a rare story, but I like to share it. So it's about my mother. It's almost 10 years ago that she passed away. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to be with her during the last 3 weeks of her life, right up to the last moment, her last breath. That was a really, really powerful experience in a number of ways. And it was sort of fortunate, too, that I was there, because I'm normally not with my family. And I just happened to be paying a visit home because I had to get a visa. I wanted to study in Italy, the master's program. I had to get a student visa. So I had to get that in this country. So I came home. It was Christmas time. So my plan was to spend Christmas with my family and get my visa. So just around the time that I arrived home, and by home I mean Eugene, Oregon, that's where my mother was living, she was diagnosed with cancer. And she'd already had breast cancer about 5 years before, but that was cured and was in remission, and it looked like everything was okay. But she'd been feeling unwell and went for some tests, and the tests came out that she had cancer all through her abdomen, liver, and so on, and it was stage 4 cancer. The doctors said that all he could do was offer chemotherapy that might give her a little bit longer to live. But she was adamant, no, I don't want chemotherapy. And she was ready to die. And that's the thing that I found really extraordinary. My mother's state of mind, her attitude. I stayed with her. She stayed at home. She died at home. And I stayed with her during those 3 weeks. So I was with her almost 24 hours a day. And in my observation, she was amazing. She didn't show, what people usually experience, fear and anxiety and sadness and clinging, anger. Sometimes people can be very angry as they approach death. None of those things. She was calm, she was peaceful, even cheerful, and loving and caring towards other people, her children. We were the main ones around her at that time. So I was like, this is amazing. I didn't expect my mother to be that way. And I think that the reason she was able to be that way was because of her religious belief and her religious practice, which had been a part of her life. It's not that she was overtly religious, she wasn't like down on her knees all the time, praying. But I just think it was very much in her heart. And it seems that she had this very deep relationship with God. She was a Catholic, and she seemed to really believe in God and trust in God, because there was one day a visitor came and asked her, aren't you afraid? I think this person was kind of surprised to see how calm and cheerful she was, and asked her, aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid of pain? Because this is one thing people fear a lot, is pain. And with cancer, you can have horrible pain. And she just said, well, I know what pain is. I've given birth to 5 children, and I've had 2 hernias. She got those while she was looking after my father, who had a number of strokes. I know what pain is, and I know that if God gives me pain, He will also give me the strength to deal with it. And I was like, wow, that just blew my mind. And I felt she was sincere, that she wasn't even afraid of pain. And in fact, fortunately, there wasn't any pain. She didn't experience any pain. And like I say, she didn't experience the usual disturbing emotions that can arise, which I think there's a connection. I think I met Jigme, isn't it? I met you shortly after that, and you explained to me that in your experience, the people who suffer the most at the time of death are those who have kind of negative minds, negative attitudes. They're angry, they're afraid, they're clingy. But people who have a very positive state of mind, positive attitude, have less pain, and medication is more effective for them. So they suffer less. I really saw that with my mother. And I was having a hard time myself. you know, this wasn't an easy time for me. I loved my mother very much. And when I was young, we had a not very good relationship because of me mainly. But thanks to Buddhism and meditation, I was able to work through most of that. And I got to the point where our relationship was really good, really healthy. And I really loved her so much. And in fact, there was one day I remember very clearly, I felt this enormous love for my mother. Because, like, when you know someone's going to be gone soon, you really appreciate them. So I was just, loving and appreciating her so much. And one day the feeling of love and appreciation in me was so powerful. And I thought, oh, this is what we're supposed to develop for all sentient beings. This is that universal love. And I thought, and I made this prayer, this aspiration, may I be able to feel this way towards all my mothers, all the sentient beings who have been my mother in the past. So that was like a really precious moment because um, I know a lot of people struggle with just feeling love for one person. Sometimes it's difficult to really love just one person, much less all sentient beings. And I'd had that problem as well much of my life. So I was really grateful that I had been able to get to that point where I could feel this amazing love. Not that it was totally pure, free of attachment or grasping at inherent existence. I don't pretend that, but it was genuine love and appreciation, and so that was one of the most powerful experiences. And then, yeah, just seeing my mother pass away so peacefully, um, that gave me hope that I might be able to die that way as well. Because in the teachings, when they talk about death, they'd often talk about how you're screaming and you're, shitting in your pants and, you know, terrified. And, it sounds really awful, except for the lamas, the great practitioners, they have peaceful death. But you don't hear too many stories of ordinary people who have a peaceful death. So seeing that in my mother, and she wasn't a great lama or a high practitioner, but she still was able to have what I think we could call a good death, a peaceful death. So that gave me hope. I'm just an ordinary person. I'm not a high lama or accomplished yogi, but seeing that my mother could die that way gave me the hope that I might be able to do that as well. And some of it hinges, so much of that hinges on our practice. Like in the talk last night, Daniel Perdue spoke about these 3 points of the death meditation, the last one being the only thing that helps at the time of death is religious practice. And I could see that with my mother. I think her life of being a good person, devoted to her family, devoted to God, having this deep faith and trust in God, enabled her to face death so calmly and peacefully and beautifully. And so, yeah, that gave me confidence that it is possible. Of course, you have to work at it. It's not just going to happen like that. We do have to make effort. We do have to familiarize ourselves with the practices. But just to see that, oh, here's an example of, the result of that. If we do live our lives in a good way, try to at least practice ethics as much as we can, not harm others, help others, try to be kind, try to be good, avoid non-virtue, and so on. At least that's like the bottom line. If we can at least live like that during our life as much as we can, then there's a good chance we'll be able to have a good death. So I like to share that because maybe not everyone is able to have such an experience with the loss of a loved one. So I hope that it can give hope to others as well.